Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Universe Night. Tonight we are not traveling to a distant galaxy or a frozen moon. Tonight the journey is much closer than that. It is happening right now, inside you, in the quiet dark behind your closing eyes. Somewhere beneath your thoughts, a master clock made of only 20,000 cells is deciding what time it is, without ever glancing at a watch. A tiny gland no larger than a grain of rice is preparing to release a hormone that will not knock you out, but will simply whisper that the day is done. Your hands and feet, without any instruction from you, are about to grow warm, quietly opening tiny doors so heat can escape and your core can cool. A molecule that has been patiently building in your brain since the moment you woke this morning is finally about to be heard. And somewhere in the gentle overlap of two ancient biological rhythms, a doorway will open, and you will slip through it into sleep, so smoothly that you will never feel yourself cross the threshold. There is nothing you need to do to make any of this happen. It has been happening every night of your life, long before you understood a single word of it. So let your shoulders soften now. Let your jaw unclench. Let your breathing slow, unhurried, the way a tide slows as it turns. Let your grip on today loosen, finger by finger, until the day simply falls away. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Let's begin. A clock made of cells decides when you are sleepy. Deep in the middle of your brain, just above the point where your optic nerves cross, sits a cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It is smaller than a grain of rice, yet it functions as the master timekeeper for nearly every rhythm in your body. It does not simply react to the day, it anticipates it. Even in complete darkness, with no clues from the outside world at all, this small cluster of cells will continue firing in a rhythm that repeats roughly every 24 hours, a pattern scientists call circadian, from the Latin for approximately a day. It tells your liver when to expect food, your adrenal glands when to release cortisol, and your pineal gland when to begin preparing you for rest. Think of it as a conductor standing in a dark concert hall long before the musicians arrive, quietly counting out a beat that the entire orchestra of your body will eventually follow. The lungs, the heart, the kidneys, even individual cells in your skin, all carry a faint echo of that same rhythm. It is a strange kind of authority, held by something so small it could rest on the head of a pin. And yet without it, your body would drift, disorganized, no longer certain when to wake or when to rest. The order that lets you live an ordinary day is quietly authored by cells you will never see or feel, following a beat set before you were even born. Light reaches a clock through cells that were only recently discovered. For decades, scientists believed the eye contained only two types of light-sensing cells, the rods and cones responsible for vision. Then, in the early 2000s, researchers identified a third kind, a small population of retinal ganglion cells containing a light-sensitive pigment called melanopsin. These cells do not help you see shapes or colors. Their job is different, and in some ways more fundamental. They exist almost entirely to tell the suprachiasmatic nucleus what time it is, by detecting the particular blue wavelengths that dominate a clear daytime sky. When morning light strikes these cells, a signal travels almost directly from the retina to the master clock, resetting it, anchoring your internal rhythm to the actual rotation of the planet. Without this daily correction, your circadian rhythm would slowly drift, since it runs slightly longer than 24 hours on its own, closer to 24 hours and 11 minutes for most people. Imagine a ship's navigator taking a single reading from the sun each day, just enough to keep an entire voyage on course, despite an imperfect compass. That is what this modest population of cells accomplishes every single morning, using nothing but daylight. It is a quiet kind of maintenance, invisible and constant, holding your internal sense of time in step with the actual turning of the earth beneath you. Your body runs on a day that is not quite 24 hours. Left entirely alone, without sunlight, clocks, or any cue from the outside world, the human circadian rhythm does not settle into a neat 24-hour cycle. In classic isolation studies, where volunteers lived for weeks in caves or windowless chambers, their sleep and wake times drifted later and later, following an internal day closer to 24 hours and 11 minutes on average. Each day, without correction, they would go to sleep a little later than E1 before. This is why morning light matters so much. It functions as a daily correction, a gentle tug that pulls this slightly too long internal day back into alignment with the actual rotation of the Earth. Without it, your sense of night and day would slowly rotate around the clock, a full cycle completing every few weeks, as has been observed in blind individuals who cannot perceive light at all, and sometimes experience a condition called non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder. Picture a slightly imprecise pendulum clock that runs a few minutes slow each day, only ever kept accurate because someone resets it each morning. Your body is that clock, and daylight is the hand that resets it. There is something humbling in this. Even something as fundamental as your sense of a day is not perfectly tuned by nature alone. It requires the sun's quiet correction every single morning of your life. Nearly every organ keeps its own private time. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is often called the master clock, but it does not work alone. Nearly every tissue in your body, from your liver to your pancreas to the skin on your arm, contains its own peripheral clock, a set of clock genes quietly oscillating on a roughly daily rhythm. These smaller clocks do not simply follow orders. They respond to their own local cues, particularly the timing of meals, and they can drift out of step with the master clock in the brain if, for example, you eat very late at night. This is part of why traveling across time zones feels so disorienting in layers. Your brain's master clock may adjust to a new time zone within a few days by responding to light, but your liver, still expecting dinner at what feels like 3 in the morning by its own clock, may take much longer to catch up. Digestion, hormone release, and even body temperature can all be quietly out of sync with one another during this adjustment. It is not unlike a large orchestra where the conductor has changed tempo, but a few musicians in the back are still finishing the previous movement. Eventually, they catch up, but for a while, the harmony is imperfect. Your body, in other words, is not governed by a single clock, but by a whole society of clocks, each one keeping its own quiet count. Cortisol rises before you ever open your eyes. Roughly 30 to 45 minutes before you naturally wake, your adrenal glands begin releasing a rising wave of cortisol, a hormone widely known for stress, but that plays an entirely different role here. This is called the cortisol awakening response, and it happens whether or not an alarm is set, driven almost entirely by the circadian signal from the suprachiasmatic nucleus rather than by the act of waking itself. This hormonal surge helps mobilize glucose for energy, raises blood pressure slightly, and sharpens alertness, essentially preparing your body for the demands of an active day before your conscious mind has any idea morning has arrived. It is one of the clearest signs that the brain is not passively waiting for daylight to act. It is anticipating it, timing a hormonal cascade to arrive just before the moment you are expected to open your eyes. Imagine a stagehand quietly adjusting the lighting and set pieces in the dark, minutes before the curtain rises, so that everything is ready the instant the audience settles in. Your endocrine system performs a version of that same preparation every single morning, unseen and unfelt, finishing its work moments before you become aware enough to notice. Even the hormone most associated with stress, it turns out, has a gentler, quieter purpose here, easing you toward wakefulness before you ever ask it to. Genes inside your cells keep their own tiny stopwatches running. The circadian rhythm is not produced by a single structure alone. At the molecular level, it emerges from a feedback loop involving a small set of clock genes, among them purr, cry, clock, and BMAL1, found in nearly every cell of the body. These genes produce proteins that build up over the course of the day, eventually accumulating enough to switch off their own production, before gradually breaking down and allowing the cycle to begin again roughly 24 hours later. This self-regulating loop, discovered largely through decades of work in fruit flies and mice, was significant enough to earn the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for the scientists who mapped it. What makes this so remarkable is that this rhythm does not require input from the brain to function. Individual cells, isolated in a laboratory dish and kept alive in nutrient solution, will continue this same rise and fall of clock proteins for days, ticking along in near isolation, entirely disconnected from the eyes, the light, or the master clock that ordinarily keeps them synchronized. It is a bit like discovering that every room in a great house contains its own small clock, quietly ticking in agreement with the grand clock in the hallway, yet each fully capable of keeping time on its own, if that connection were ever severed. There is something quietly astonishing in this. Time, it turns out, is not simply something your brain tracks and imposes on the rest of the body. It is written into the molecular machinery of nearly every living cell you carry. A gland the size of a pea decides when night has begun. Nestled deep in the center of the brain between the two hemispheres sits the pineal gland, a small pinecone-shaped structure that René Descartes once mistakenly believed was the seat of the human soul. Its actual role is quieter, and in its own way just as remarkable. As darkness falls and signals from the suprachiasmatic nucleus travel through a winding neural pathway, the pineal gland begins converting a bright daytime signaling molecule called serotonin into melatonin, the hormone most associated with the arrival of night. This is not an instant switch. Melatonin typically begins rising in the blood around 2 hours before a person's natural bedtime, climbing gradually through the evening and peaking in the middle of the night, before falling again as morning approaches. Unlike many hormones that surge and vanish quickly, melatonin's release is a slow, deliberate unfolding, matching the gradual way night itself settles over a landscape. Picture a lighthouse keeper who does not flip a single switch to summon darkness, but instead slowly, patiently lowers the wick of every lamp as evening deepens. That is closer to what the pineal gland does each night, not commanding sleep, but dimming the internal lights that keep you tethered to wakefulness. It is easy to imagine the brain as a place of constant activity, and yet each night, in near total silence, something the size of a pea reshapes your entire internal chemistry. Darkness is the signal, and light is the interruption. Melatonin release depends almost entirely on the absence of light reaching those specialized retinal cells discussed earlier, the ones containing melanopsin. In true darkness, the pathway from eye to brain to pineal gland proceeds uninterrupted, and melatonin rises steadily. But even modest exposure to light, particularly the blue-enriched light emitted by phones, tablets, and LED lamps, can suppress this release, sometimes delaying the rise of melatonin by an hour or more. This is why a bright screen late at night can feel like convincing your own body that morning has somehow arrived early. The melanopsin-containing cells cannot easily distinguish between actual sunlight and the blue wavelengths of an artificial glow. To the ancient signaling pathway connecting your eyes to your pineal gland, light is light, regardless of its source. Consider a night watchman who has worked the same dark hallway for centuries, trained only to notice the difference between light and no light, never designed to recognize the particular flicker of a screen. That watchman still dutifully reports every glimmer he sees, even when the source is entirely unfamiliar to the biological systems built long before electricity existed. There is something quietly poetic in this vulnerability. A signaling system shaped over hundreds of thousands of years of firelight and moonlight is now negotiating every single evening with a kind of light that did not exist until a century ago. Melatonin does not sedate you, it informs you. A common misconception treats melatonin as a sleep-inducing drug, something that forces unconsciousness the way an anesthetic might. In reality, melatonin functions more like a messenger than a sedative. Its primary role is to signal biological night, essentially informing the rest of the body that darkness has arrived, and it is time to prepare for rest, rather than directly causing sleep itself. This distinction matters. Melatonin levels can be high in a person lying wide awake in a dark room, because darkness alone is enough to trigger its release, independent of whether sleep actually follows. What melatonin actually does is help synchronize the timing of sleep with the timing of night, nudging the circadian clock and lowering core body temperature slightly, both of which make the onset of sleep more likely, without themselves producing unconsciousness the way a sedative would. It is a bit like a lighthouse signal that tells ships it is safe to enter harbor at night, without physically pulling any vessel toward the dock. The ships must still choose to sail in. This is part of why melatonin supplements, often taken in doses far higher than the body ever naturally produces, can shift the timing of sleep without necessarily deepening or lengthening it. The messenger delivers its message. What happens next is still, in large part, up to the rest of the system. The signal fades with age, quietly and gradually. Melatonin production is not constant across a lifetime. It is remarkably low in early infancy, rises through childhood, and reaches some of its highest levels around the preteen years before beginning a slow decline that continues, gradually, into old age. By the time a person reaches their 70s or 80s, nighttime melatonin levels may be only a fraction of what they were in youth. This decline is one of several reasons why sleep patterns often shift with age, with older adults frequently reporting lighter, more fragmented sleep and earlier natural waking times. It is not simply that older bodies need less sleep, a common misconception, but that several of the systems governing sleep, including this one, grow quieter over the decades. There is something almost tidal about it, a signal that rises through childhood as if gathering strength, crests, and then slowly, imperceptibly, begins to recede. The way a tide pulls back so gradually from a shoreline that no single moment marks the change. It is a reminder that the architecture of sleep is not fixed. It shifts throughout an entire life, following its own quiet, evolving rhythm, largely invisible to the person experiencing it. Long before you feel sleepy, your core is already cooling. One of the clearest physical signals that sleep is approaching has nothing to do with feeling tired at all. It is a drop in core body temperature, typically beginning 1 to 2 hours before a person's habitual bedtime. Core temperature, the internal heat of vital organs, follows its own circadian rhythm, peaking in the early evening and then beginning a slow descent that continues through much of the night, reaching its lowest point in the hours just before dawn. This decline is not incidental. Research has repeatedly linked the rate of core temperature drop to how quickly a person falls asleep, with a faster decline generally associated with a shorter path into sleep. The body, in effect, is cooling itself down in preparation, the way a machine might be powered down gradually rather than switched off all at once. Picture a forge at the end of a long day, its fire slowly banked rather than doused, heat easing away in careful stages, so that nothing cracks from the strain of sudden cooling. Your body manages its own internal heat with something like that same careful patience each night. It is easy to think of falling asleep as something that happens primarily in the mind. And yet, hours before conscious drowsiness sets in, your body has already begun a quiet, physical descent, unfolding entirely without your awareness. Warm hands and feet are the body's way of losing heat. If you have ever noticed your hands or feet feeling unusually warm just before bed, you are witnessing a specific physiological mechanism called distal vasodilation. As bedtime approaches, blood vessels near the surface of the skin in the hands, feet, and face widen, increasing blood flow to these extremities. This is not simply comfort, it is thermoregulation. These areas, rich in specialized blood vessels called arteriovenous anastomoses, act as efficient radiators, allowing the body to shed core heat rapidly through the skin. Studies using thermal imaging have shown that warmer hands and feet closely predict how quickly a person will fall asleep, so reliably that some researchers have used skin temperature gradients as a measurable marker of approaching sleep onset. Cooling the core while simultaneously warming the extremities allows heat to escape efficiently, accelerating the very temperature drop that helps trigger sleep. Imagine a house on a summer evening, its windows deliberately thrown open not to bring in outside air, but to let the day's trapped heat finally escape. Your hands and feet perform something like that function each night, opening tiny vascular windows so your inner heat can find its way out into the surrounding air. It is a small, easily overlooked detail, warm feet peeking out from under a blanket, and yet it reflects a precise, ancient piece of biological engineering working quietly in the background of an ordinary night. A cooler room is not a preference, it is a physiological advantage. Sleep researchers have found that ambient room temperature meaningfully affects both how quickly people fall asleep and how well they stay asleep through the night, with most studies pointing to a range around 65 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly 18 degrees Celsius, as close to ideal for many adults. This is not simply about comfort. A cooler environment makes it easier for the body to accomplish the core temperature drop it is already trying to achieve, working with the body's natural process rather than against it. In a room that is too warm, the body must work harder to shed heat, sometimes delaying the temperature decline associated with sleep onset, or causing more frequent awakenings later in the night as the body struggles to maintain its ideal internal temperature. This is part of why hot summer nights, or overheated bedrooms in winter, are so commonly associated with restless, fragmented sleep. Think of it as trying to cool a cup of tea. In a cold room, heat escapes readily into the surrounding air. In a room already warm, that same cup stays hot far longer, resisting the very process it needs to undergo. Something as simple as the temperature of a bedroom, easily controlled with a thermostat or an open window, is quietly collaborating each night with one of the body's oldest biological processes. Body temperature reaches its lowest point just before dawn. Core body temperature does not simply fall once and remain low. It follows a full circadian arc, declining through the evening and much of the night, reaching its lowest point, called the temperature nadir, typically between 4 and 6 in the morning, before beginning to climb again in anticipation of waking. This nadir often coincides with some of the deepest, most difficult to interrupt sleep of the entire night. This rhythm is remarkably consistent, tracked in laboratory studies using rectal or core sensors even when subjects are kept awake through the night, showing that the temperature cycle is driven by the circadian clock itself, rather than sleep as an activity. In other words, your body continues this temperature choreography, whether or not you are actually asleep to experience it. It is not unlike the tide reaching its lowest ebb in the deep hours of night, retreating furthest from shore precisely when few are awake to witness it, only to begin its quiet return well before the world wakes to notice. There is something almost private about this. Your body reaches its coolest, quietest internal state in the very hours when consciousness itself has receded furthest. A rhythm unfolding faithfully whether or not anyone is present to observe it. The two systems that decide bedtime do not always agree. Sleep scientists describe sleep timing using what is known as the two-process model, first proposed by researcher Alexander Borbely in the early 1980s. One process, called Process S, or sleep homeostasis, builds sleepiness the longer a person stays awake. The other, Process C, is the circadian rhythm itself, an independent internal clock that promotes wakefulness or sleepiness at particular times regardless of how tired a person feels. Sleep normally occurs when these two systems align, when accumulated sleep pressure meets a circadian signal favoring rest. But these two processes do not always move in perfect harmony. There is a period in the early evening, sometimes called the wake maintenance zone or the forbidden zone for sleep, when the circadian system is actively promoting alertness, even as sleep pressure has been building for hours. This is why many people report feeling a strange burst of energy in the early evening, even after a long, tiring day, followed later by sleepiness, arriving in a more concentrated wave, once that circadian alertness signal fades. Picture two separate tides, one rising steadily through the day, the other following its own independent schedule tied to the rotation of the Earth. Sleep arrives smoothly only when these two tides happen to crest together. It is a reminder that tiredness is not one simple sensation, but the product of two very different systems, sometimes in agreement, sometimes quietly working against one another. Adenosine is the molecule counting the hours since you woke. Sleep pressure, the growing urge to sleep the longer a person stays awake, is driven in large part by a molecule called adenosine, which gradually accumulates in the brain during waking hours. Adenosine is produced as a byproduct of cellular energy use, particularly in a form called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, the molecule cells rely on for fuel. As neurons remain active throughout the day, adenosine steadily builds up in the spaces between cells, particularly in a region called the basal forebrain, gradually increasing the pressure to sleep. This buildup is remarkably reliable, rising in a near-linear fashion the longer a person stays awake, and falling again during sleep as the brain clears it away. It functions almost like an hourglass, quietly measuring elapsed wakefulness in the language of chemistry rather than clock time. Imagine sand steadily filling the bottom of an hourglass throughout the day, each grain representing another minute spent awake, until finally there is enough accumulated weight to tip the balance toward rest. Adenosine performs something like that function inside your brain, an invisible accounting system, tracking exactly how long it has been since you last slept. It is a strange thought that the specific pull toward bed at the end of a long day is not simply psychological exhaustion, but the direct, measurable buildup of a single small molecule, quietly counting every waking hour. Caffeine works by hiding the sleep signal, not by adding energy. Caffeine is often described as an energy booster, but its actual mechanism is more subtle and in some ways more interesting. Caffeine does not supply energy to the brain. Instead, it works by binding to adenosine receptors, the very same receptors that adenosine itself would normally occupy to signal sleepiness. By blocking these receptors without activating them, caffeine effectively prevents the brain from detecting how much adenosine has actually accumulated. The adenosine is still there, quietly building throughout the day exactly as it always would. Caffeine does not stop this accumulation. It simply prevents the brain from noticing it, a bit like covering a fuel gauge with tape rather than adding more fuel to the tank. Once caffeine's effects wear off, often several hours later, the accumulated adenosine can suddenly bind to its receptors all at once, sometimes producing a pronounced wave of tiredness known informally as a caffeine crash. Picture a mailroom where messages continue arriving all day, only for someone to keep locking the inbox so no one can read them, until the lock finally gives way and every waiting message arrives at once. Caffeine performs a version of that same quiet interference, delaying a signal rather than erasing it. It is worth pausing on this. One of the most widely used substances on the planet does not create wakefulness at all. It simply postpones the moment the brain notices how tired it already is. Sleep is when the accumulated pressure is finally cleared away. If adenosine steadily builds throughout waking hours, sleep is the process that clears it. Studies measuring adenosine levels across a full sleep cycle have found that concentrations in the brain fall significantly during sleep, particularly during the deeper stages, essentially resetting the pressure that built up during the day. By the time a person wakes after a full night of adequate sleep, adenosine levels have typically returned close to their baseline, and the cycle begins again. This is part of why insufficient sleep creates a compounding effect. If adenosine is not adequately cleared one night, some of that pressure appears to carry over, contributing to what researchers call sleep debt, a kind of biological deficit that does not simply vanish with a strong cup of coffee the next morning, since caffeine masks the signal without addressing the underlying buildup. Think of it as a riverbed slowly filling with sediment throughout each day of use, requiring a proper flood sleep to clear it away and restore the channel to its original depth. Skip that flood and the sediment does not vanish. It simply continues accumulating, layer upon layer, until it is finally addressed. There is something almost mechanical in this, a nightly maintenance ritual as essential and as invisible as clearing debris from the machinery that keeps a mind running clearly each day. Even naps borrow briefly from tomorrow's sleep pressure. Because sleep pressure is driven largely by time spent awake rather than time spent asleep specifically, a nap taken during the day can measurably reduce the sleep pressure that would otherwise be waiting at bedtime. This is why a long or late afternoon nap sometimes makes it harder to fall asleep at the usual hour that night. Not because anything has gone wrong, but because some of the adenosine that would have built up by evening has already been partially cleared. Sleep researchers generally distinguish between short naps, often 20 to 30 minutes, which tend to have a mild effect on nighttime sleep pressure, and longer naps, which draw more heavily on that same reservoir, sometimes shifting bedtime later or making sleep onset noticeably slower. This is also part of the reasoning behind recommendations to nap earlier in the day rather than close to evening, allowing enough time for sleep pressure to rebuild before night arrives. It is a bit like drawing water from a well earlier in the day. There is still time for the well to refill before night falls, though drawing too much, too late, can leave it running lower than expected when it is needed most. Even something as simple as an afternoon nap, then, is quietly negotiating with the same chemical system that governs the entire night ahead, borrowing briefly from a reserve that must eventually be repaid. Not all tiredness is the same kind of tiredness. It is tempting to think of tiredness as a single, uniform sensation, but sleep researchers generally separate it into at least two distinct experiences. One is sleepiness proper, the physiological pressure to fall asleep, driven largely by adenosine and circadian timing, measurable through tools like the multiple sleep latency test, which records how quickly a person drifts off when given repeated opportunities to nap throughout the day. The other is fatigue, a sense of low energy or reduced capacity that can occur even without genuine sleep pressure, sometimes tied to mental exertion, illness, or emotional strain rather than time spent awake. This distinction matters clinically. A person can feel exhausted, heavy-limbed, and mentally foggy, and yet, if placed in a dark, quiet room, struggle to actually fall asleep, because true sleep pressure has not yet reached a sufficient level. Conversely, someone might feel reasonably alert while sitting upright in bright light, only to fall asleep within moments the instant they lie down in darkness, revealing sleep pressure that had been masked by an alerting environment. Think of it as the difference between an engine that has genuinely run low on fuel and one that is simply idling roughly, technically full of fuel, but not running smoothly for entirely separate reasons. This is not simply a scientific curiosity. It is a reminder that the sense of wanting rest and the body's actual readiness for sleep are related, but distinct, and not every heavy-eyed evening reflects the same underlying story. The mind drifts into a threshold state called hypnagogia. As wakefulness finally gives way to sleep, most people pass through a strange transitional state known as hypnagogia, typically lasting only a few minutes. In this state, the boundary between waking thought and dreaming begins to blur. People often report vivid, fragmented imagery, brief flashes of scenes, faces, or places that arise unbidden, along with a peculiar sense of drifting, sometimes described as floating or gently falling. Electroencephalogram recordings during this stage typically show a shift from alpha waves, associated with calm, relaxed wakefulness, toward slower theta waves, marking the earliest measurable transition into what is formally classified as Stage 1 sleep. Thought during this period often loses its usual logical structure, drifting associatively from one fragment to another in a way that can feel, to the person experiencing it, almost like a preview of dreaming itself. Some artists and writers, including Salvador Dali and Thomas Edison, are said to have deliberately exploited this state, holding an object in one hand so that its clatter upon falling, as their muscles relaxed into sleep, would jolt them awake just long enough to capture the strange, associative imagery that had briefly surfaced. It is a fittingly strange threshold, this brief, shimmering space where the ordered logic of waking thought dissolves, just for a few minutes, into something closer to the raw material of dreams. Brainwaves slow as the mind lets go of its grip on the outside world. Every stage of sleep carries its own distinctive electrical signature, and the transition into the very first stage is marked by a subtle but measurable shift in brain activity. During relaxed wakefulness, particularly with eyes closed, the brain typically produces alpha waves, rhythmic oscillations occurring around 8 to 12 times per second. As stage 1 sleep begins, this rhythm slows and becomes less regular, shifting into theta waves, oscillating more slowly, generally between 4 and 8 times per second. This is not a sudden event but a gradual fading, alpha waves becoming intermittent before giving way entirely, reflecting a real and measurable decline in the synchronized firing patterns among certain populations of neurons. Researchers studying these transitions have found that even a person's own subjective sense of when they fell asleep is often inaccurate, since this earliest stage can feel, from the inside, almost indistinguishable from simply resting with closed eyes. Picture the string section of an orchestra gradually easing their tempo. No single dramatic cue marking the change, just a slow, collective drift into something calmer, until the audience realizes only in retrospect that the piece has shifted entirely. It is a quiet dissolution, the mind's most immediate moment-to-moment awareness of the world softening by degrees, well before any sense of true unconsciousness sets in. The body sometimes jerks awake for no clear reason at all. Many people, just as they begin drifting into sleep, experience a sudden, involuntary muscle contraction, often accompanied by a sensation of falling or a vivid, brief flash of imagery. This is known as a hypnic jerk or sleep start, and it is remarkably common, with studies suggesting a majority of people experience it at least occasionally. Despite how unsettling it can feel, hypnic jerks are considered a normal, largely harmless phenomenon. The precise cause remains somewhat debated among researchers, though one leading explanation involves the brain briefly misinterpreting the muscle relaxation that naturally accompanies the onset of sleep. As muscle tone decreases and breathing and heart rate slow, some scientists propose that certain brain regions may momentarily interpret this relaxation as a signal of falling, triggering a brief protective muscular reflex, not unlike the startle response of catching oneself before an actual stumble. Consider a night watchman handing off his post to another guard, and in the disorienting handover, briefly reacting to a shadow that was never actually a threat. That momentary overreaction, harmless but startling, is a reasonable way to think about what a hypnic jerk represents. Fatigue, caffeine, and irregular sleep schedules all appear to increase how often these jerks occur, suggesting that an overtaxed nervous system may simply be a little clumsier during this particular handoff into sleep. The eyes begin to move slowly, tracing gentle, aimless paths. As stage 1 sleep deepens and the alert, purposeful gaze of wakefulness fades, the eyes begin a distinctive pattern of movement known as slow rolling eye movements. Unlike the quick, darting saccades that characterize waking vision, or the rapid bursts that will later define REM sleep, these early movements are slow, smooth, and largely aimless, drifting gently from side to side beneath closed lids. Researchers using electrooculography, a technique that measures the electrical activity generated by eye movement, have used this specific slow-rolling pattern as one of the reliable markers distinguishing true sleep onset from simple relaxed wakefulness. It typically appears just as alpha brainwave activity fades and theta waves begin to dominate, offering another physical signpost along the path into unconsciousness. Picture a small boat that has finally stopped being steered, drifting now only with the gentle push of unseen currents, no longer following any particular destination, simply moving because the water beneath it is moving too. There is something fitting in this image. The eyes, so often instruments of focus and intention throughout the waking day, finally released from that duty, left to wander gently and without purpose as the mind eases itself into sleep. Awareness of the surrounding world fades before full unconsciousness arrives. One of the more curious features of early sleep onset is that sensory disconnection from the environment does not happen all at once. As a person drifts into stage 1 sleep, the brain becomes progressively less responsive to external stimuli. But this filtering is graded rather than absolute. A quiet room might still register faintly, while a loud, sudden noise, such as a phone ringing, can pull a person back to full wakefulness even after they believe themselves already asleep. This graded responsiveness reflects ongoing activity in the thalamus, a brain structure often described as a relay station for sensory information. During the transition into sleep, thalamic activity begins to change in ways that increasingly filter incoming signals before they reach the higher processing regions of the cortex, gradually dampening the brain's engagement with the outside world, even as certain pathways remain cautiously alert. It is not unlike a household slowly dimming its lights room by room for the night, the kitchen and hallway going dark first, while one lamp near the door is deliberately left burning, just in case someone still needs to be let in. This careful, incomplete withdrawal from the world is not a flaw in the system. It is a feature, a lingering evolutionary caution ensuring that even in the earliest moments of sleep, the door to sudden danger is never entirely closed. The felt sense of falling marks the closing of one kind of awareness. Many people describe the earliest moments of sleep onset as a subjective sensation of falling, sinking, or drifting downward, even while lying perfectly still. This sensation appears closely tied to the same transitional period associated with hypnic jerks and the slowing of brainwave activity, occurring as the vestibular system, responsible for the body's sense of balance and spatial orientation, receives less consistent input from a body that is rapidly losing muscle tone and conscious control. Some researchers suggest this falling sensation may result from a temporary mismatch. The inner ear and proprioceptive systems still expecting the kind of steady, active feedback present during wakefulness, briefly registering the sudden reduction in muscular engagement, as if the body were actually losing its footing. It is, in a sense, a very old alarm system responding honestly to genuinely new and unfamiliar conditions. Picture a tightrope walker who has just been told, mid-performance, that the rope beneath their feet has quietly turned to something softer, no longer solid, no longer something to be balanced upon in the usual way. For a brief moment, that confusion registers as falling, even though nothing has actually gone wrong. It is a strange kind of threshold to cross, feeling briefly as though the ground itself is dissolving. In the very moment the mind is finally, gently, letting go of its hold on the waking world. Breathing itself begins to change before stage one has even ended. Even in this earliest and lightest stage of sleep, respiration is already shifting. Waking breath tends to be somewhat irregular, adjusted constantly and often unconsciously for speech, posture, and emotion. As stage one sleep settles in, breathing typically becomes slower and more even, though it has not yet reached the steady regularity that will define deeper stages later in the night. Some individuals experience brief, almost imperceptible pauses or shifts in breathing rhythm during this transition, a normal feature of the shift from voluntary to more automatic respiratory control. This handoff is significant. Waking breathing is partly guided by the cortex, the brain's outer layer responsible for conscious thought and voluntary movement. As that region quiets during sleep onset, control of breathing shifts increasingly toward more primitive structures in the brainstem, regions that have been regulating respiration, largely unconsciously, since long before the earliest stirrings of conscious thought ever existed in any species. Picture a ship's helm changing hands in the middle of the night, an experienced night captain quietly taking over from a daytime crew, adjusting course by feel and instinct rather than by chart and instruction. It is easy to forget that breathing, something performed roughly 20,000 times a day without a single conscious command, is itself undergoing a quiet handover each night, one more small and faithful transition folded into the larger passage into sleep. The heart quietly slows its pace as sleep deepens. As the body eases from wakefulness into true sleep, the heart undergoes a measurable and consistent change in rhythm, gradually slowing from a typical waking rate to something noticeably lower, often dropping by 10 to 20 beats per minute over the course of the early night. This decline is driven largely by a shift in the balance of the autonomic nervous system, away from the sympathetic branch associated with alertness and exertion, and toward the parasympathetic branch, often described as the body's rest and digest mode. This is not a single, uniform slowdown. Heart rate continues to fluctuate throughout the night, dipping further during deep sleep and rising somewhat during the more active stage known as REM. But the overall trend across a healthy night is a gradual settling into a slower, steadier rhythm than the one carried through a waking day. Researchers can track this shift using heart rate variability, a measure of the subtle variation between individual heartbeats, which typically increases during deep sleep, reflecting a nervous system that has, for a few hours, largely set aside its vigilance. Picture a hardworking factory finally closing its loudest machines down for the night. One by one, the clatter and hum gradually replaced by the quieter, more even sound of only the essential systems still running. It is easy to overlook something as constant as a heartbeat, and yet each night it performs its own careful descent, slowing not because anything has gone wrong, but because, for a few hours, so much less is being asked of it. The gap between heartbeats tells a story of its own. Heart rate variability, the subtle, beat-to-beat variation in timing between individual heartbeats, offers researchers a surprisingly rich window into how the nervous system behaves throughout the night. Rather than simply measuring how fast or slow the heart beats, this metric captures something more nuanced: the flexibility and responsiveness of the underlying nervous system controlling it. Higher variability, generally more prominent during deep sleep, is typically associated with strong parasympathetic activity and is often considered a favorable marker of cardiovascular and nervous system health. Wearable sleep trackers have popularized this measure considerably in recent years, though clinical researchers had already been studying heart rate variability for decades before it became a familiar term. Across a single night, this measure typically rises during slow-wave sleep, dips somewhat during the more physiologically active periods of REM sleep, and offers, when tracked over time, a useful signal of how well the autonomic nervous system is recovering and adapting from one night to the next. Picture a musician's timing, technically accurate if played with perfectly rigid mechanical evenness, and yet somehow more alive and more responsive when a touch of natural breathing variation is allowed to remain. It is a fitting note to end on here, that even the tiny, almost imperceptible gaps between one heartbeat and the next are quietly telling their own story each night, one increasingly within reach of anyone curious enough to listen. Not every hour of sleep is equally gentle on the heart. Despite the overall trend toward a slower, calmer rhythm across the night, cardiovascular research has identified certain windows of increased vulnerability layered within sleep itself. The transition out of sleep in the early morning hours, when cortisol begins rising and the body shifts back toward sympathetic dominance in preparation for waking, has been associated in numerous epidemiological studies with a higher incidence of cardiac events, including heart attacks and certain arrhythmias, compared to other times of day. Researchers refer to this general pattern as a morning surge in cardiovascular risk. The reasons appear to be multifactorial, involving the simultaneous rise of cortisol, increased blood pressure, heightened platelet activity, and a general shift in autonomic balance, all converging within a relatively narrow window as the sleeping body prepares to become a waking one again. For most healthy individuals, this transition passes without incident. But for those with existing cardiovascular vulnerabilities, this predictable morning shift represents a genuine, measurable period of elevated physiological demand. Picture a bridge whose greatest structural stress does not occur while it is fully loaded with steady traffic, but during the brief, transitional moments when the flow of that traffic is changing, shifting direction, or ramping suddenly upward from stillness. It is a subtle irony that the heart's quietest hours are not necessarily its safest ones, and that the gentle, private hinge between sleep and waking carries its own small, measurable share of biological risk. Blood pressure follows the heart into its nightly decline. Alongside the slowing heart, blood pressure typically falls during sleep as well, a phenomenon researchers call nocturnal dipping. In most healthy adults, blood pressure during sleep drops by roughly 10 to 20% compared to daytime waking values, following a predictable pattern tied closely to the same autonomic shift responsible for the slowing heart rate. This dip is considered such a reliable marker of healthy cardiovascular regulation that its absence, a pattern doctors call non-dipping, is itself used as a warning sign for elevated cardiovascular risk. The mechanism behind this nightly dip involves multiple systems working in concert: reduced sympathetic nervous system activity, changes in kidney function that affect fluid balance, and the general reduction in physical activity and metabolic demand that comes with lying still and unconscious for hours at a stretch. Blood vessels, in a sense, are permitted to relax their grip slightly, since there is little urgent need to maintain the pressure required for an active, upright day. Consider a network of canals whose locks are eased open slightly each night, not because the water is any less vital, but because, with no boats to move and no cargo to deliver until morning, the system can afford a gentler flow. There is something quietly reassuring in this nightly pattern, a whole cardiovascular system stepping back from its daytime vigilance, trusting, at least for a few hours, that nothing urgent will be asked of it. Not every part of sleep treats the heart identically. Although the general trend across a night of sleep is a slowing heart rate, this pattern is far from uniform once REM sleep begins. During REM, the stage most closely associated with vivid dreaming, heart rate can become notably more variable, sometimes rising close to waking levels for brief stretches, then falling again, mirroring the more chaotic and unpredictable brain activity that defines this stage. Researchers have documented these fluctuations closely enough that changes in heart rhythm are themselves used as one of several markers to help identify which stage of sleep a person has entered. This variability is thought to reflect the unusual nature of REM sleep itself, sometimes described as a state in which the brain is highly active while the body remains almost entirely still, held in a kind of temporary paralysis discussed later. The autonomic nervous system, still tasked with managing something as vital as heart rhythm, seems to respond to the vivid internal activity of dreaming, much as it might respond to real waking emotion or exertion, even though the body itself lies motionless. Imagine a submarine gliding silently through calm, deep water, its hull perfectly still on the surface, while inside, instruments and systems fluctuate wildly in response to the environment being explored, unseen by anyone watching from above. It is a striking contradiction, a body utterly motionless, its heart nonetheless rising and falling in rhythm with events that exist nowhere but inside a sleeping mind. Breath grows slower, steadier, and less voluntary as sleep deepens. Respiration undergoes one of the most significant transformations of the entire sleep process. During wakefulness, breathing is influenced by a wide mix of voluntary and involuntary control, adjusted constantly for speech, posture, and emotional state. Once sleep begins in earnest, and particularly as it deepens into slow-wave sleep, breathing becomes markedly more regular, settling into a steady, rhythmic pattern controlled almost entirely by involuntary centers in the brainstem, primarily the medulla and pons. This regularity comes with a trade-off, because breathing during deep sleep depends so heavily on brainstem regulation and less on cortical input, the body's usual moment-to-moment adjustments to changes in oxygen or carbon dioxide levels become somewhat less responsive. This is part of why certain breathing disorders, including sleep apnea, tend to reveal themselves so clearly during sleep, when the usual conscious compensations available during wakefulness are no longer part of the equation. Picture a factory floor transitioning from a shift managed by attentive, adaptable workers to one run entirely by a fixed automated system, efficient and steady under normal conditions, but less able to respond creatively if something unexpected occurs. It is a quiet irony that breathing, arguably the most essential and continuous act the body performs, becomes at once more regular and more vulnerable during the very hours when conscious oversight steps furthest away. REM sleep briefly disrupts the calm rhythm of breath, while slow-wave sleep brings breathing to its most regular and predictable state. REM sleep interrupts that steadiness considerably. During REM, respiration frequently becomes faster, shallower, and notably more irregular, closely tracking the vivid, often emotionally charged mental activity associated with dreaming. Researchers have observed that breathing during REM can shift rapidly, sometimes within a single dream sequence, moving from calm and even to quick and shallow, paralleling events unfolding entirely within the sleeper's mind. This irregularity is thought to be closely tied to the broader neurological signature of REM sleep, a state in which brain activity, measured by EEG, closely resembles that of active wakefulness, even though the body itself remains almost completely still due to the muscle paralysis that defines this stage. Breathing muscles are a partial exception to this paralysis, since respiration must continue regardless of sleep stage. But the pattern they produce still reflects the turbulence occurring within the sleeping brain. Consider a violinist whose bow arm continues moving steadily through a symphony, even as the piece being played shifts unpredictably beneath their fingers, tempo and intensity rising and falling with a score only they can hear. It is a small, easily missed detail of an ordinary night that the steadiness of breath itself rises and falls in step with a story unfolding entirely in silence, visible to no one but the dreamer. A single deep breath before bed carries an old and curious function. Yawning, an act closely associated with both tiredness and the approach of sleep, remains a subject of ongoing scientific curiosity, since a complete explanation for its purpose has proven surprisingly elusive. Leading theories suggest that yawning may help regulate brain temperature, drawing in a rush of cooler air and increasing blood flow in ways that offer a brief cooling effect to the brain, a function that would align neatly with the broader pattern of cooling the body undergoes as sleep approaches. Other research points to a role in increasing alertness during transitional states, briefly stretching the jaw muscles and increasing heart rate in a way that may help ease the shift between different levels of arousal. Yawning's famously contagious nature, spreading reliably from one person to another within a shared space, adds a further layer of interest, with some researchers linking this contagion to mirror neuron activity and social bonding, particularly among individuals who are emotionally close to one another. Whatever its full explanation, yawning remains a strikingly universal behavior, observed not only in humans but across a wide range of vertebrate species, including reptiles, birds, and virtually all studied mammals. Picture a small mechanical valve, releasing pressure with a single sharp exhale, part function and part ritual. A gesture repeated instinctively by nearly every creature with a spine that has ever needed to make the transition from wakefulness toward rest. It is worth marveling, if only briefly, that something as ordinary and universal as a yawn remains, even now, only partially understood. A small daily mystery tucked quietly into the very last moments before sleep begins. Sleep apnea reveals how fragile this regulation can become. For some people, the shift toward involuntary, brainstem-driven breathing during sleep exposes a vulnerability that remains largely hidden during waking hours. Obstructive sleep apnea, one of the most common sleep disorders, occurs when the muscles of the throat relax so completely during sleep that the airway becomes partially or fully blocked, causing repeated pauses in breathing that can occur dozens or even hundreds of times each night, each one typically ended by a brief, often unremembered awakening as the brain responds to falling oxygen levels. This condition illustrates just how much the waking brain compensates for airway stability without any conscious awareness of doing so, tensing throat muscles subtly throughout the day in ways that simply relax too far once voluntary. Control fades during sleep. The repeated awakenings caused by apnea, though usually too brief to be remembered, can fragment sleep so severely that a person may spend 8 hours in bed and still wake feeling profoundly unrested, since the deeper, more restorative stages of sleep are repeatedly interrupted before they can properly unfold. Picture a drawbridge that stays reliably raised all day through careful tension in its cables, only for those same cables to loosen unexpectedly each night, allowing the bridge to sag, closed at exactly the moments when passage beneath it is most needed. It is a striking reminder that even something as automatic as breathing rests on a delicate balance of muscular support, one that can quietly fail each night in ways the waking mind never has cause to notice. A familiar nighttime sound is simply tissue vibrating in a relaxed airway. Snoring, one of the most common and universally recognized sounds of human sleep, results from the vibration of soft tissue in the throat, particularly the soft palate and uvula, as air passes through a partially narrowed airway. As muscle tone decreases during sleep, particularly during deeper stages, the tissues lining the upper airway relax and narrow slightly, and the resulting turbulent airflow causes them to flutter, producing the familiar sound that can range from barely noticeable to strikingly loud. For most people, occasional or mild snoring is a harmless byproduct of normal muscle relaxation during sleep, unrelated to any underlying disorder. It becomes clinically significant primarily when it is loud, frequent, and accompanied by pauses in breathing, gasping, or excessive daytime sleepiness, which together may point toward obstructive sleep apnea rather than simple, benign snoring. Position also plays a notable role, since sleeping on the back allows gravity to pull the tongue and soft tissues further backward, narrowing the airway more than side sleeping typically does. Picture a flag on a still evening, its fabric hanging loose and motionless, only to begin fluttering and snapping the moment a breeze finally picks up enough force to catch its loosened edges. It is a strange thought that one of the most recognizable sounds associated with deep, restful sleep is, in its simplest form, nothing more than the ordinary consequence of muscles finally letting go of a tension they had carried, largely unnoticed, throughout the entire waking day. the brain grows quieter and then briefly defends its quiet. As sleep progresses beyond its lightest opening stage, it settles into what researchers classify as stage 2 sleep, typically the longest single stage across a full night, often accounting for roughly half of total sleep time in adults. Brain activity during stage 2 grows notably calmer than during stage 1, with a further slowing of background rhythm. But this stage is defined less by its overall quiet than by two very specific and striking bursts of electrical activity: sleep spindles and K-complexes. Sleep spindles are short bursts of brainwave activity, oscillating rapidly between roughly 12 and 14 times per second, typically lasting half a second to 2 seconds, generated primarily through interactions between the thalamus and the cortex. K-complexes, by contrast, are single, large, slow waves, often appearing in response to an external stimulus, such as a sudden sound, though they can also occur spontaneously. Together, these two signatures give stage 2 sleep its distinctive electrical fingerprint, easily recognized on an overnight EEG recording. Picture a lighthouse that has otherwise gone dark for the night, its beam still sweeping the horizon at brief, irregular intervals, a quiet reassurance that something is still watching, even in the deepest hours of stillness. It is in this stage, often dismissed as merely a transitional or lighter form of sleep, that some of the brain's most intricate and purposeful nighttime activity quietly begins to unfold. Sleep spindles act like tiny gatekeepers, protecting sleep from disturbance. Sleep spindles, those brief, rapid bursts of brainwave activity that define much of stage 2 sleep, appear to serve a specific and fascinating purpose beyond simply marking a stage of sleep. Research has repeatedly linked spindle activity to sensory gating, the brain's capacity to filter out potentially disruptive external stimuli while remaining asleep. Individuals who naturally generate more spindles during a given night have, in several studies, shown greater resilience to being woken by ordinary environmental noise compared to those with fewer spindles. This gating function appears to be carried out largely by the thalamus, the same brain structure that plays a central role in relaying sensory information during wakefulness. During spindle activity, thalamic neurons shift into a firing pattern that effectively reduces the flow of incoming sensory signals toward the cortex, essentially closing a rise of small doors just long enough to protect ongoing sleep from being interrupted by minor disturbances that would otherwise reach conscious awareness. Picture a series of quiet sentries positioned along a sleeping village's outer wall, each one briefly rousing to intercept a minor disturbance, deciding independently whether it warrants waking the entire village or can simply be allowed to pass without further notice. It is a remarkable thought that the brain, even while deeply engaged in something as passive as sleep, maintains an active, moment-to-moment system of judgment, deciding what the sleeping mind does and does not need to know. Sleep spindles also appear tied to learning and intelligence. Beyond their protective role, sleep spindles have been closely linked in numerous studies to memory consolidation, the process by which newly learned information is stabilized and integrated into longer-term storage. Research measuring spindle activity following a day of learning has found that greater spindle density often correlates with better retention of that material the next day, suggesting these brief bursts of thalamocortical activity may play a direct role in strengthening particular memory traces during sleep. Some studies have gone further, finding associations between overall spindle activity and measures of general cognitive ability, though researchers are careful to note that correlation here does not necessarily establish a simple, direct causal relationship. Still, the association is consistent enough across multiple lines of research that sleep spindles are considered one of the more promising biological markers connecting sleep architecture to cognitive function. Imagine a scribe working quietly through the night, moving methodically through the events of the previous day, carefully deciding which details deserve to be copied more permanently into a lasting record, and which can simply be allowed to fade. It is a striking thought that something as brief and fleeting as a burst of brain activity lasting barely a second could, repeated many times across a single night, meaningfully shape what a person remembers, and perhaps even how sharply they think the following day. A single giant brainwave can respond to the world without waking you. Among the most distinctive features of stage 2 sleep is the K-complex, a single, large, slow wave that stands out clearly against the surrounding brain activity, first described by researchers in the 1930s. K-complexes can occur spontaneously, but they are also reliably triggered by unexpected external stimuli, such as a sudden sound, suggesting they represent a kind of built-in response to potential disturbance, one that manages to process and evaluate the stimulus without necessarily waking the sleeper at all. Researchers have proposed that K-complexes may serve two seemingly opposite functions simultaneously, both suppressing the disruptive potential of a stimulus so that sleep can continue undisturbed, and briefly increasing the brain's readiness to wake fully if the stimulus were to prove significant enough to warrant it. In this sense, a K-complex functions less like a simple filter and more like a rapid, provisional judgment, weighing a disturbance and, in most cases, quietly deciding it does not yet require full attention. Picture a night guard who, upon hearing a distant sound, pauses only briefly, listens carefully, and then, satisfied it poses no threat, returns to a relaxed post without ever needing to raise a general alarm. It is a remarkable thing to consider that even in sleep, the brain is not merely absent from the world around it, but continuously, briefly, and almost imperceptibly deciding, one large slow wave at a time, What does and does not deserve to break through into waking awareness? The pattern of these bursts changes across a lifetime, too. Sleep spindles are not static features of adult sleep. Their frequency, density, and even their characteristic rhythm shift measurably across the human lifespan, emerging in a rudimentary form in infancy, becoming more organized and frequent through childhood and adolescence, and generally declining in both number and amplitude in older adulthood. Researchers studying these age-related changes have proposed that spindle activity may serve as a useful biological marker of brain health, since reduced spindle density in aging has been associated in some studies with changes in memory performance. This developmental arc parallels, in a general sense, the broader story of slow-wave sleep discussed elsewhere, another feature of deep, restorative sleep architecture that tends to be most robust earlier in life. Together, these patterns suggest that the brain's capacity for certain kinds of highly organized, synchronized nighttime activity is not simply constant, but follows its own quiet trajectory, most active during the years of greatest neural development, gradually softening thereafter. Picture a bell that once rang with a full, resonant tone in its youth, still ringing reliably decades later, though with a note that has grown gradually softer and less frequent, still recognizable, simply less insistent than it once was. There is a certain grace in this image, a small nightly rhythm that mirrors, faithfully and without complaint, the larger arc of a life it has quietly accompanied since its very beginning. Deep sleep brings the brain into a rare state of unified rhythm. Beyond stage 2 lies slow-wave sleep, often called deep sleep, marked by the emergence of large, slow, synchronized brain waves known as delta waves, oscillating at less than 4 cycles per second. This synchronization is remarkable in itself. During wakefulness, different regions of the cortex tend to fire somewhat independently, processing different streams of information related to vision, sound, movement, and thought. During deep sleep, vast populations of neurons instead begin firing in near unison, rising and falling together in slow, sweeping waves that can be observed clearly across an entire EEG recording. This is considered the deepest, most restorative stage of non-REM sleep, and it is notoriously the hardest stage from which to wake a person. Someone roused abruptly from slow-wave sleep often experiences a period of grogginess and disorientation known as sleep inertia, sometimes lasting many minutes, reflecting just how far the brain has drifted from its ordinary waking pattern of activity. Picture an enormous choir, each singer normally following an individual, slightly different melodic line, suddenly falling into a single unified chord, sustained and swelling together, filling the entire hall with one unbroken sound. There is something almost paradoxical in this. The brain's quietest, most restful state is also, in its own way, one of its most extraordinarily coordinated, millions of neurons briefly abandoning their usual independence to move as one. Deep sleep is concentrated early in the night for a specific reason. Slow-wave sleep is not distributed evenly across a full night's rest. It appears most prominently during the first third of the night, often dominating the earliest sleep cycles before gradually diminishing in later cycles, which shift instead toward longer periods of REM sleep as morning approaches. This pattern closely tracks the build-up and release of sleep pressure discussed earlier. Since slow-wave sleep appears to be the stage most directly responsible for clearing accumulated adenosine and resolving the homeostatic drive to sleep. This front-loading has practical consequences. Studies on sleep deprivation consistently find that the body prioritizes recovering slow-wave sleep above other stages when catching up after a period of insufficient rest, suggesting that this stage carries a particularly urgent restorative function. A person who sleeps only a few hours will often still obtain a disproportionate share of slow-wave sleep during that short window, even at the expense of the REM sleep that would ordinarily follow later in a full night. Consider a household repairing the most structurally urgent damage to a building first, patching a leaking roof before turning attention to repainting a hallway, prioritizing according to genuine necessity, rather than simply working through tasks in their usual order. It is a quiet demonstration of the body's own sense of priority, placing its most physically restorative work first, trusting, if trust is even the right word, that the remainder of the night will be used as well as circumstances allow. Deep sleep grows scarcer as the decades pass. Slow-wave sleep is not a fixed feature of adult life. It declines steadily with age, often beginning as early as a person's 20s or 30s, with some studies suggesting the amount of deep sleep in healthy older adults can be reduced by half or more compared to the levels typically seen in adolescents. This decline appears to correspond with measurable physical changes in the brain itself, including a gradual thinning of the prefrontal cortex, a region closely involved in generating the synchronized slow waves that define this stage of sleep. This is one of several reasons older adults commonly report lighter, more easily disrupted sleep, even without any diagnosed sleep disorder. It is not simply a matter of needing less rest, a persistent misconception, but rather a reflection of genuine, measurable changes in the brain's capacity to generate the particular kind of unified neural rhythm that deep sleep requires. Researchers studying this decline have found associations between reduced slow-wave sleep in older adulthood and various markers of cognitive and cardiovascular health, making it an active area of continued study. Picture a grand old orchestra hall whose acoustics have quietly shifted over decades, still capable of music, still filled most nights, yet no longer producing quite the same full, resonant chore D it once achieved so easily in its earlier years. There is something gently sobering in this, a reminder that the depth of a single night's rest is not entirely constant across a life, but slowly, subtly reshaped by the same passage of years that reshapes everything else about a person. The brain has its own private plumbing system, and it works mostly at night. For much of modern neuroscience, the brain was assumed to lack the kind of lymphatic drainage system that clears waste from most other tissues in the body. That assumption changed significantly with the discovery, described in detail beginning around 2012, of what researchers named the glymphatic system, a network relying on glial cells, particularly astrocytes, to move cerebrospinal fluid through brain tissue, flushing away metabolic waste products that accumulate during a day of intense neural activity. What makes this system especially striking is how strongly its activity appears tied to sleep. Research conducted on mice found that glymphatic flow increased dramatically during sleep compared to wakefulness, with some estimates suggesting waste clearance nearly doubling during sleep states. This appears to result partly from a measurable increase in the space between brain cells during sleep, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to move more freely through tissue that is more tightly packed during waking hours. Picture a bustling city whose narrow, crowded streets are impossible for cleaning crews to navigate during the day, only for those same streets to widen, almost imperceptibly, once the crowds have gone home for the night, finally allowing thorough, uninterrupted cleaning to take place. It is a genuinely remarkable image, an entire physical cleaning system built into brain tissue itself, one that depends on sleep not simply for rest, but for the literal, physical clearing away of the day's accumulated debris. The brain quietly shrinks to let its own cleaning crew through. One of the more startling findings connected to the glymphatic system involves the physical space between brain cells itself. Research has suggested that during sleep, the interstitial space, the narrow gaps between neurons and glial cells, expands by a substantial margin compared to its size during wakefulness, in some measurements by as much as 60%. This expansion is thought to reduce resistance to fluid flow, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to move through brain tissue far more efficiently than would otherwise be possible. This structural shift appears to be closely tied to changing levels of noradrenaline, a neurotransmitter associated with alertness that drops substantially during sleep. Lower noradrenaline levels are thought to allow brain cells to contract slightly, widening the surrounding channels much as pedestrians naturally create more walking space between one another once a crowded plaza begins to empty out. Imagine a warehouse whose shelving units are mounted on unseen tracks, quietly sliding a few inches apart each night after the workers go home, just wide enough to let a cleaning cart finally pass freely down aisles that were impossibly cramped only hours before. It is a strange and beautiful detail of ordinary biology that the very structure of brain tissue subtly reshapes itself each night, not for thought or memory, but simply to make room for its own essential maintenance. This entire cleaning system carries a name built from two older ideas. The term glymphatic, coined by neuroscientist Macon Nettergaard and colleagues around 2012, deliberately combines glial, referring to the supportive brain cells central to the system's function, with lymphatic, the name for the body's broader waste clearance network found throughout the rest of the body. The brain itself lacks a conventional lymphatic system of the kind found in other organs, which for many years left open the puzzling question of how the brain managed to clear its own metabolic waste at all. The discovery relied heavily on advanced imaging techniques capable of tracking the movement of fluid through living brain tissue in real time, revealing a previously unrecognized pathway in which cerebrospinal fluid moves along channels surrounding blood vessels, aided by specialized water channels called aquaporin 4, concentrated on the astrocyte cells lining these pathways. This finding filled in a significant and long-standing gap in understanding how the brain, an organ with famously high metabolic demands, manages to keep itself clear of its own waste. Picture cartographers finally mapping a hidden network of underground rivers that had, in some form, been quietly flowing beneath a city for its entire history, simply unnoticed until someone thought to look in exactly the right way. It is worth appreciating how recent this discovery truly is. An entire physiological system, essential to brain health and closely tied to the value of a good night's sleep, remained completely unknown to science until more than a decade ago. Waste clearance during sleep may protect against long-term decline. Among the substances the glymphatic system appears to help clear is beta-amyloid, a protein fragment that, when allowed to accumulate abnormally, forms the plaques closely associated with Alzheimer's disease. Research in animal models has found that glymphatic clearance of beta-amyloid is markedly reduced during sleep deprivation, and some human studies using imaging techniques have found associations between poor sleep quality and higher levels of beta-amyloid accumulation in the brain over time. It is important to note that this relationship is still an active area of ongoing research, and scientists are careful not to overstate a simple, direct causal chain between a single night of poor sleep and long-term neurological disease. Still, the association is consistent enough across multiple studies that many researchers now consider adequate sleep a meaningful, modifiable factor in supporting long-term brain health, alongside diet, exercise, and other well-established influences. Picture a groundskeeper who tends carefully to a large estate each night, clearing fallen debris from the walkways before it can accumulate into something far harder to remove, aware that skipping even a few nights of this quiet work could eventually let the problem grow beyond simple, easy maintenance. There is something quietly motivating in this. The nightly, unfelt work of clearing the brain's own waste may be, in its own understated way, one of the most protective things an ordinary night of sleep does for a mind across the full span of a life. Even the position you sleep in may influence this cleaning process. Researchers investigating glymphatic function have found evidence, primarily in animal studies, suggesting that body position during sleep may influence how efficiently cerebrospinal fluid moves through the brain's clearance channels. One frequently cited study using rodent models found that glymphatic transport appeared most efficient in a lateral, or side-sleeping position, compared to sleeping on the back or stomach, potentially due to how this position affects the anatomy of fluid pathways near the base of the brain. While researchers are cautious about translating findings from animal models directly onto human sleep behavior without further confirmation, this line of research has drawn considerable interest, given how simple and low-cost the practical implication would be if the pattern holds true in humans. Since sleep position is something most people could adjust with relatively little effort compared to other interventions aimed at brain health. Picture a network of drainage channels running beneath a garden, functioning reasonably well regardless of the season, yet flowing just a little more freely whenever the surrounding ground happens to settle into its most naturally favorable slope. It is a small, still developing thread of research, but a fitting one to end on here. A reminder that even something as simple and unconscious as the position a sleeping body settles into may quietly shape how well the brain performs its own essential nightly housekeeping. A pituitary gland releases its largest hormonal surge while you sleep. The pituitary gland, often called the master gland for its role in regulating so much of the body's hormonal activity, releases the majority of its daily output of growth hormone during sleep, particularly during the deep, slow wave stages that dominate the first part of the night. This pulse of growth hormone is significantly larger than the smaller, more sporadic releases that occur during waking hours, making sleep the single most important period for this hormone's activity across an entire day. Growth hormone plays a wide-ranging role in the body, stimulating tissue growth and repair, supporting bone density, and influencing how the body processes fat and builds muscle. Its close association with slow-wave sleep is well established enough that researchers studying sleep and growth hormone secretion together have found the two rise and fall in close, reliable synchrony, with disruptions to deep sleep correspondingly reducing the size and consistency of this nightly hormonal pulse. Consider a factory that saves its most intensive production run for the overnight shift, when the noise and disruption of daytime operations have finally quieted enough to allow careful, large-scale work to proceed without interference. It is a fitting arrangement that the hormone most associated with growth and repair, reserves its greatest release for the very hours when the body itself is finally still enough to receive it without interruption. Sleep is also a nightly exercise in metabolic fasting. Growth hormone released during sleep does not occur in isolation. It unfolds alongside a broader shift in the body's metabolic state, since sleep typically represents the longest continuous period of fasting most people experience in an ordinary day. During this extended fast, insulin sensitivity and the hormonal signals governing fat and glucose metabolism shift in ways that appear to complement the tissue-building, repair-oriented work that growth hormone promotes, favoring the breakdown of stored fat for energy over the storage processes more dominant during and after waking meals. This relationship helps explain why chronic sleep disruption has been linked in numerous studies to disturbances in glucose regulation and insulin sensitivity, effects that can appear even after just a few nights of significantly shortened or fragmented sleep. Researchers studying sleep restriction have found measurable shifts in markers of metabolic health after surprisingly brief periods of inadequate rest, suggesting this nightly hormonal and metabolic choreography is more fragile and more consequential than it might first appear. Picture a household that quietly reorganizes its entire budget overnight, shifting funds away from everyday spending and toward long-term savings and repairs, simply because the demands of the working day have finally paused long enough to allow it. It is easy to think of sleep purely as rest for the mind, and yet metabolically, it is also a nightly negotiation, one in which growth, repair, and energy management are all being carefully balanced, largely without a single conscious decision required. This is part of why children require so much more sleep than adults. The tight relationship between slow-wave sleep and growth hormone release helps explain one of the more intuitive observations in sleep science: the substantially greater sleep needs of children compared to adults. Infants and young children spend a considerably larger proportion of their sleep in slow-wave stages compared to adults, coinciding with the years of most rapid physical growth and development. As children move through adolescence and into adulthood, both the proportion and total amount of slow-wave sleep gradually decline, tracking closely with a corresponding decline in growth hormone secretion. This is not simply about time spent unconscious. It reflects a deep functional link between a particular stage of brain activity and a hormonal process essential for building an entire body from infancy onward. Disruptions to sleep in children, whether from irregular schedules, screen exposure, or underlying sleep disorders, have been associated in various studies with effects on growth patterns, underscoring just how directly these two systems are connected. Picture a construction site that requires its heaviest deliveries of raw material during the earliest, most intensive phase of building, only to scale those deliveries back considerably once the structure is largely complete and only ongoing maintenance remains. It is a quiet reminder that sleep is not simply rest set aside from the real work of living. For a growing body, it is very often where a significant portion of that real work actually takes place. Growth hormone continues its quiet repair work well into adulthood. Although growth hormone secretion declines with age, it does not disappear in adulthood, and its nightly release continues to serve important restorative functions throughout life. In adults, growth hormone contributes to ongoing tissue repair, supports the maintenance of muscle mass, and plays a role in regulating metabolism, including how the body manages fat storage and blood sugar levels. Athletes and researchers studying recovery from physical exertion have paid particular attention to this hormone, given its close ties to muscle repair following exercise-induced strain. Sleep deprivation studies have found that when slow-wave sleep is disrupted or reduced, the nightly pulse of growth hormone is correspondingly diminished, even if total sleep time remains largely unchanged. This suggests that the quality and depth of sleep, not merely its duration, plays a meaningful role in how effectively this particular hormonal process unfolds each night, a distinction increasingly emphasized by researchers studying recovery and long-term health. Picture a repair crew whose most productive hours depend not simply on how long they are allowed to work, but on how uninterrupted and focused that time actually is, since a shift full of false starts accomplishes far less than one of genuine, sustained effort. It is worth remembering, then, that sleep continues to matter for repair and renewal long after childhood growth has finished, quietly supporting a body that never entirely stops rebuilding and maintaining itself, one still, unconscious night at a time. Muscles quietly rebuild themselves while the body lies still. Sleep is one of the primary windows in which the body carries out muscle repair and growth, a process driven largely by increased protein synthesis during deep, slow-wave stages. Throughout an ordinary day physical activity, even something as ordinary as walking or lifting light objects produces countless microscopic tears in muscle fibers. Sleep, particularly when paired with the growth hormone release discussed earlier, provides the biochemical environment in which these fibers are rebuilt, often slightly stronger than before, a process central to how the body adapts to physical demand over time. Athletes and sports scientists have paid particularly close attention to this relationship, since studies on sleep restriction have repeatedly found measurable declines in recovery, strength, and even injury resilience among individuals who consistently sleep less than needed, independent of training load itself. This has shifted sleep, once treated as a secondary consideration, into what many coaches and physiologists now describe as a core, foundational pillar of physical performance and recovery. Picture a construction crew that quietly returns each night to a building site, left slightly stressed and worn from the day's work. patiently reinforcing weakened joints and replacing worn material before the next day's demands begin again. It is a fitting thought to carry into sleep each night that even perfect stillness is not biological idleness. Beneath a body lying motionless in the dark, a slow and steady process of rebuilding is quietly, faithfully underway. The raw materials for repair matter as much as the timing itself. While sleep provides the hormonal and physiological window in which muscle repair predominantly occurs, researchers studying recovery have emphasized that this process still depends on adequate raw material being available, particularly dietary protein consumed earlier in the day. Studies examining protein timing relative to sleep have found that consuming protein in the hours before bed may modestly support overnight muscle protein synthesis, though researchers are careful to note that total daily protein intake appears to matter considerably more than the precise timing of any single meal. This nightly repair process is not limited to athletes or those engaged in intense physical training. Even relatively light daily activity produces the kind of minor cellular where that ordinary overnight repair addresses, meaning this process quietly supports nearly everyone, largely regardless of specific fitness goals or exercise habits, simply by virtue of being an active, physically embodied person moving through an ordinary day. Picture a nightly repair crew arriving reliably each evening, fully capable and willing to do their work, yet still dependent on a supply chain established earlier in the day to make sure the necessary materials are actually on hand when the work begins. It is worth remembering that sleep does not operate in isolation from the rest of a day's choices, but works instead as the quiet, essential final step in a longer process that begins the moment a person first sits down to eat. Muscle tone itself follows its own nightly descent. Beyond active repair, resting muscle tone, the baseline tension muscles maintain even without conscious movement, declines steadily as sleep deepens. This reduction is not uniform across all stages. It decreases gradually through the non-REM stages, before dropping to its most extreme low point during REM sleep, when, as later segments will explore, the body enters a state of near-total paralysis. This general softening allows the body to conserve energy and prevents needless muscular strain across the many hours spent lying in one position. Researchers studying muscle activity through electromyography, a technique that measures electrical activity in muscle tissue, have documented this decline clearly across a typical night, correlating closely with the deepening of sleep stages measured through simultaneous EEG recordings. This gradual muscular release is part of why a genuinely restful night often leaves muscles feeling looser and less tense than they did the evening before, distinct from any specific repair taking place within the tissue itself. Picture a hand slowly unclenching after holding something tightly for hours. each finger easing its grip not all at once, but gradually, one small release following another until the whole hand finally rests open and unguarded. There is something quietly moving in this image. The body's entire muscular system slowly setting down a burden of tension it had carried, largely unnoticed, throughout an entire day of upright, effortful living. Even a motionless sleeper is quietly shifting position through the night. Despite how still sleep can appear from the outside, most people change position multiple times over the course of a typical night, often between 10 and 40 times, though the vast majority of these shifts are brief, unconscious, and never remembered upon waking. These positional changes appear to serve a genuinely protective function, redistributing pressure across the body and preventing prolonged compression of any single area of skin, tissue, or nerve or too long a stretch. Researchers studying this behavior have noted that positional shifts tend to occur more frequently during lighter stages of sleep and around the natural boundaries between sleep cycles, while deep slow-wave sleep and REM sleep, the latter due to its characteristic paralysis, are typically associated with much longer stretches of stillness. This pattern suggests the timing of movement itself is not random, but subtly coordinated with the broader architecture of the night's sleep stages. Picture a sculptor's model, asked to hold a single pose for hours at a stretch, permitted every so often to quietly adjust an arm or shift their weight just enough to avoid strain, without ever fully breaking the overall stillness of the scene. It is a small, easily overlooked detail of an ordinary night, that even in its deepest stillness, the body never quite abandons its own careful, quiet vigilance over comfort and circulation. An army of immune cells becomes more active while you sleep. Sleep plays a substantial and well-documented role in supporting immune function, a relationship reflected in measurable shifts in immune cell activity across a typical night. Certain white blood cells, including T cells, have been shown in research to exhibit improved capacity for adhering to and responding to signals during sleep compared to waking hours, while levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines, signaling molecules involved in coordinating immune responses, typically rise during the early part of the night, particularly alongside slow-wave sleep. This nightly immune activity is thought to play an important role in the body's ability to fight infection, with numerous studies linking sleep deprivation to reduced antibody response following vaccination and greater susceptibility to common illnesses, such as the cold virus following controlled exposure. One frequently cited study found that individuals who regularly slept fewer than 6 hours a night were significantly more likely to develop a cold after direct viral exposure compared to those sleeping 7 hours or more. Picture a nightly changing of the guard at a fortress, where the daytime watch steps back and a fresh, more numerous garrison quietly takes up position, better prepared and more attentive to any threat that might arise before morning. It is easy to think of illness as something that simply happens to a tired body. It may be more accurate to say that a well-rested body is, each night, actively strengthening its own defenses well before any threat ever appears. Inflammation itself follows a careful, choreographed rhythm through the night. The immune activity that intensifies during sleep is not simply a matter of more cells being active. It follows a specific, carefully timed rhythm, with certain pro-inflammatory processes rising during the early part of the night before gradually easing later on. A pattern that appears closely coordinated with the broader architecture of sleep stages themselves. Disrupting this rhythm through fragmented or insufficient sleep has been associated in research with chronically elevated markers of inflammation even during waking hours, a pattern some researchers link to increased long-term risk for a range of chronic conditions. This finding has reframed how many researchers think about the relationship between sleep and health more broadly, suggesting that consistent, high-quality sleep may function as a kind of ongoing regulatory mechanism, helping keep the immune system's naturally protective inflammatory responses appropriately contained rather than left running at elevated levels for extended periods without an adequate nightly correction. Picture a controlled, carefully tended fire, deliberately built up and then banked back down each night, providing exactly the warmth and light needed for its purpose, never left to burn unchecked or grow long past its usefulness. It is a striking thought that something as broad and consequential as the body's inflammatory balance quietly depends, in part, on a rhythm as ordinary and overlooked as a full, uninterrupted night of sleep. This is part of why illness so often makes a person want to sleep more. The relationship between sleep and immune activity runs in both directions. Not only does sleep support immune function, but the immune system itself appears capable of actively promoting sleep, particularly during illness. Certain cytokines released as part of the body's immune response to infection, including one called interleukin-1, have been shown in research to have sleep-promoting effects, offering a plausible biological explanation for why fatigue and an increased desire for sleep so commonly accompany colds, flu, and other infections. This phenomenon, often referred to informally as sickness behavior, appears to represent an adaptive strategy rather than simply an unfortunate side effect of feeling unwell. Increased sleep during illness may allow the body to redirect energy toward immune activity that would otherwise be spent on waking activity, while the deeper, more consolidated sleep associated with fighting infection may further support the specific immune processes explored in earlier segments. Picture a household that quietly closes its shop for a few days during a period of urgent repair work, not out of simple exhaustion, but because every available resource is needed elsewhere until the more pressing task has been properly resolved. It is a fitting reminder that the pull toward rest during illness is not a failure of willpower or simply a symptom to be pushed through, but very possibly the immune system itself, quietly and deliberately asking for the specific conditions it needs to do its work well. Roughly 90 minutes in, the brain shifts into an entirely different mode. After cycling through the lighter and deeper stages of non-REM sleep, the brain enters rapid eye movement sleep, commonly known as REM, typically for the first time about 70 to 90 minutes after sleep onset. This stage marks one of the most dramatic shifts in the entire sleep cycle. Brain activity during REM, measured by EEG, closely resembles the fast, irregular patterns typically associated with active wakefulness, a similarity striking enough that REM is sometimes described, informally, as paradoxical sleep, since the brain appears highly active even as the body remains deeply asleep. This first REM period of the night tends to be relatively brief, often lasting only a few minutes, but subsequent REM periods lengthen considerably as the night progresses, with the longest stretches typically occurring in the final cycles before natural waking. It is during REM sleep that most vivid, narrative dreaming occurs, though dreaming can occur during other stages as well, generally in a less vivid or coherent form. Picture a theater that has been dark and still for hours, suddenly filling with light, sound, and motion as an elaborate, unscripted performance begins. One that only a single audience member, the dreamer, will ever witness. It is a remarkable transformation to consider that the same brain lying motionless in a darkened room has, within the space of a single night, cycled fully from near silence into something resembling the vivid, restless activity of a waking mind. REM sleep gets its name from a very literal, visible detail. The defining physical feature of REM sleep, the rapid, jerking eye movements that give the stage its name, are clearly visible even to an observer simply watching a sleeping person's closed eyelids. These movements, tracked precisely using electrooculography, occur in short, irregular bursts, quite different from the slow, gentle rolling eye movements described earlier during the onset of stage 1 sleep. Researchers have long debated the exact purpose of these movements, with some evidence suggesting they may correspond to shifts in visual attention within the dream itself. Though this scanning hypothesis remains an area of ongoing investigation rather than settled fact. What is well established is that these eye movements are generated by activity originating in the brainstem, a region that also plays a central role in triggering the muscle paralysis that accompanies REM sleep, discussed further ahead. The eyes, in a sense, represent one of the few parts of the body still granted a measure of active movement during a stage otherwise defined by near total physical stillness. Picture a puppeteer working diligently behind a fully lowered curtain, the audience unable to see the performance itself, yet still able to notice the occasional flicker of motion at the curtain's edge, hinting at the activity unfolding just out of sight. It is a fittingly visible clue to an otherwise hidden process, small darting movements behind closed eyes offering the only outward glimpse into a mind that has, for the moment, gone somewhere entirely its own. The discovery of this stage reshaped an entire field of science. REM sleep was first formally identified and described in 1953 by researchers Eugene Aserinsky and Nathaniel Clayton at the University of Chicago, who observed periods of rapid eye movement accompanied by distinctive brain activity in sleeping subjects, a finding that fundamentally reshaped how scientists understood sleep itself. Before this discovery, sleep was widely regarded as a single, largely passive state, uniform in character from the moment of onset until waking. The identification of REM revealed instead that sleep was a dynamic, highly structured process, containing at least one stage in which the brain remained remarkably, unexpectedly active. This discovery opened an entirely new field of scientific inquiry, prompting decades of subsequent research into the distinct stages of sleep, their associated brainwave patterns, and their respective functions, much of which forms the foundation of the very science being described throughout this journey. Its style, NDS, as one of the more striking reminders in the history of science that fields long considered largely settled, can still contain entire hidden layers, waiting for the right kind of careful, patient observation to reveal them. Picture explorers arriving at what they believe to be a small, thoroughly mapped island, only to discover, upon closer inspection, an entire hidden cave system running beneath its surface, vast and largely unexplored. It is worth pausing to appreciate that so much of what this journey has described, an entire architecture of stages, rhythms, and hidden nightly processes, remained essentially unknown to science for the greater part of human history, uncovered only within the relatively recent memory of the last century. This paralysis mechanism appears widely across the animal kingdom, too. REM sleep and its accompanying muscle atonia are not uniquely human phenomena. Researchers have documented REM-like sleep states, including comparable patterns of muscle paralysis, across a wide range of mammals and birds, from mice and cats to dolphins and even some reptiles, suggesting this mechanism reflects a deeply conserved evolutionary strategy rather than a feature that emerged recently or exclusively within the human lineage. Some species show fascinating variations, including certain marine mammals capable of resting one brain hemisphere at a time, a strategy that allows them to continue surfacing for air even during sleep. This broad distribution across such distantly related species suggests that whatever REM sleep accomplishes, whether related to memory processing, emotional regulation, or other functions still being investigated, has proven valuable enough across an enormous span of evolutionary time to be preserved, in some recognizable form, again and again, throughout the animal kingdom. Picture a solution so effective that countless different engineers, working independently across centuries and continents, each arrive at some close variation of the very same design, simply because the underlying problem it solves is universal enough to demand a similar answer. It is a fitting thought to carry forward that the strange, paralyzed, dreaming state now being described is not simply a peculiar feature of the human mind, but one small, shared thread connecting a sleeping person to a vast, ancient lineage of dreaming creatures. The body deliberately paralyses itself each time a dream begins. One of the most striking features of REM sleep is a phenomenon called REM atonia, a state of near-total paralysis affecting most of the body's voluntary skeletal muscles. This paralysis is not accidental or incidental. It is actively generated by specific circuits in the brainstem, primarily involving the pons, which trigger the release of inhibitory neurotransmitters, including glycine and GABA, onto motor neurons in the spinal cord, effectively silencing the signals that would otherwise allow the limbs to move in response to brain activity. This mechanism serves an important protective function. Without it, the body would be at risk of physically acting out the vivid, often physically dynamic content of dreams, a possibility that becomes tragically real in a rare condition called REM sleep behavior disorder, in which this normal paralysis fails to fully engage, sometimes resulting in individuals thrashing, kicking, or even leaving the bed while still deeply asleep and dreaming. Picture a marionette whose strings have been deliberately, carefully slackened by an unseen hand, not because the puppeteer has stopped working, but precisely so that a particularly vivid and active scene can unfold safely, without the puppet itself lurching dangerously off the stage. It is a remarkable piece of biological engineering, a brain fully capable of generating movement, quietly severing that capability each night, precisely so that the mind can wander freely without placing the body it inhabits at any real risk. A few muscles are deliberately left outside this nightly lockdown. REM atonia, while extensive, is not absolute. Certain muscles remain functional throughout REM sleep out of clear biological necessity. The diaphragm and other muscles involved in breathing continue working normally, since respiration cannot be safely paused for the duration of a dream. Similarly, the muscles controlling eye movement remain active, producing the rapid eye movements that define the stage, and certain muscles of the inner ear also continue some activity, a curious detail researchers are still working to fully explain. This selective exemption reveals just how precisely targeted the paralysis mechanism actually is, rather than functioning as some kind of blunt, full-body shutdown. The brainstem circuitry responsible appears capable of distinguishing between muscle groups whose continued function is essential for survival and comfort, and those whose stillness is required to keep the sleeping body safe during a period of intense internal activity. Picture a building placed under a strict overnight lockdown, every door and window firmly secured, except for a single, carefully monitored entrance left deliberately open, one whose continued function is simply too essential to the building's basic survival to ever be sealed shut. It is a small but telling detail that even in a state defined by nearly total stillness, the body's own systems have quietly decided, with considerable precision, exactly which few exceptions are too important to ever be included. Sleepwalking arises from an almost opposite kind of malfunction. While REM sleep behavior disorder involves a failure of paralysis to properly engage during REM sleep, sleepwalking, formerly known as somnambulism, arises from an essentially different and unrelated mechanism, typically occurring during deep, slow-wave sleep rather than REM. During an episode of sleepwalking, portions of the brain responsible for movement and basic motor coordination appear to remain partially active or become reactivated, while the regions responsible for full conscious awareness remain largely offline, producing a state in which complex movement is possible without accompanying wakeful awareness. This distinction matters since it means sleepwalking and REM sleep behavior disorder, though both involve movement during sleep, represent essentially opposite failures within the sleep system. One arising from too little muscular inhibition during a stage that would normally keep the body still, the other from a kind of partial, disorganized activation, occurring during a stage that does not typically involve REM's atonia mechanism at all. Sleepwalking is particularly common in children, who generally outgrow the tendency as the relevant brain regions mature. Picture two very different kinds of malfunction in the same theater. One where the stage lights fail to dim during a performance meant to remain entirely private. The other where a stagehand, still half asleep, wanders unintentionally into a scene despite no performance being scheduled at all. It is a useful reminder that sleep is not a single simple switch between motion and stillness, but a carefully layered system with multiple, independent points where something can, on rare occasion, go quietly astray. Dreams are where the sleeping brain rehearses and reorganizes the day. REM sleep is closely associated with one of sleep's most significant cognitive functions, memory consolidation, the process by which newly formed memories are stabilized and integrated into existing knowledge. Research using brain imaging has found that regions active during the original learning of certain tasks, particularly spatial and procedural skills, often show renewed activation during subsequent REM sleep, suggesting the brain may be replaying and reinforcing these experiences during dreaming itself. This process appears especially important for emotional memories. Some research suggests that REM sleep may help process emotionally charged experiences, by re-encoding them in a way that reduces their emotional intensity while preserving the factual content. A process some researchers describe informally as taking the sting out of a memory without erasing the memory itself. This has led to growing interest in the relationship between REM sleep disruption and conditions such as post-traumatic stress disorder, where this natural processing function may be impaired. Picture an editor working through the night on the raw footage of an entire day, carefully selecting which scenes deserve a permanent place in the final cut, softening the harshest moments just enough that they can be recalled clearly later without reliving their full original intensity. It is a striking thought that dreaming, so often dismissed as strange or purposeless, may actually represent the mind's own quiet editorial process, working through the emotional and factual material of a day long before conscious reflection ever has the chance to begin. Most dreams vanish long before they can ever be recalled. Despite the vivid, often narratively rich nature of REM dreaming, most dreams are forgotten almost immediately upon waking, with research suggesting a person may have 4 to 6 dream periods each night yet typically recall, at most, only 1 or 2, and often none at all. One leading explanation involves the reduced activity, during REM sleep, of brain regions associated with forming new explicit, consciously accessible memories, including certain areas within the prefrontal cortex that are more active during wakefulness and play a key role in memory encoding. Additionally, levels of noradrenaline, a neurotransmitter that plays an important role in memory formation, drop to their lowest point of the entire sleep cycle during REM, potentially limiting how effectively dream content is transferred into the kind of memory that can later be consciously retrieved. This may help explain why dreams recalled immediately upon waking, particularly from a final REM period near morning, are often the only ones a person remembers with any clarity at all. Picture an elaborate performance staged nightly in a theater with no working recording equipment, brilliant and fully realized in the moment, yet leaving behind, for anyone outside the room, only the faintest and most fragmentary trace once the curtain falls. It is a strange and slightly humbling thought that some of the mind's most vivid, immersive creative activity unfolds each night largely for an audience of one, and often not even reliably for that one, since even the dreamer so often wakes with little more than a fading, half-remembered fragment. The hippocampus and cortex appear to talk to each other during sleep. Memory consolidation during sleep is thought to depend heavily on communication between the hippocampus, a brain structure central to forming new memories, and the neocortex, where memories are eventually stored in a more stable, long-term form. Research using recordings in animal models has found evidence of hippocampal activity during sleep that appears to replay, in compressed and accelerated form, patterns of neural firing that occurred during earlier waking experiences, a phenomenon researchers call hippocampal replay. This replay appears to occur alongside the slow oscillations and sleep spindles discussed in earlier segments, with some research suggesting these different brain rhythms may become precisely coordinated in time, allowing information to be effectively transferred from the hippocampus's more temporary storage into the cortex's longer-term architecture. This process is sometimes described using the analogy of active systems consolidation, treating memory formation not as a single event, but as an extended process that continues well after the original moment of learning has passed. Picture a courier working through the quiet hours of the night, carrying messages from a temporary way station to a permanent archive, sometimes making the same journey many times over until the message has been fully, reliably transferred and safely filed away. It is worth sitting with this image for a moment, that a memory formed in a single waking instant may not be truly complete until it has been carried, again and again, across a bridge built each night out of nothing but sleep. The body briefly loses its grip on its own temperature during REM, while non-REM sleep is generally associated with the steady core temperature decline discussed earlier. REM sleep introduces a curious disruption to this process. During REM, the body's normal thermoregulatory responses, such as shivering in response to cold or sweating in response to heat, are substantially reduced or temporarily suspended, leaving core temperature more directly influenced by the surrounding environment than during other sleep stages. Some researchers have described this state as functionally similar, for a brief period, to the temperature regulation seen in poikilothermic animals, those whose body temperature varies with their surroundings, though this comparison is used descriptively rather than as a precise biological equivalence. This temporary vulnerability is part of why sleeping in an environment that is too warm or too cold can be particularly disruptive during REM periods specifically, sometimes contributing to more frequent awakenings during the later portions of the night, when REM periods are naturally longer and more frequent. Picture a ship's navigation system briefly switched to manual override during a particularly complex maneuver, trusting momentarily in the surrounding conditions rather than its usual automated corrections, precisely because so much of its attention is occupied elsewhere. It is a curious vulnerability tucked into an otherwise protective stage of sleep, a reminder that even the body's most fundamental regulatory systems occasionally step back, however briefly, to make room for the demanding internal work of dreaming. Even the pupils and blood vessels behave differently during this stage. Beyond temperature regulation, REM sleep is associated with broader instability across the autonomic nervous system, the network responsible for regulating many of the body's involuntary functions. Blood pressure and heart rate, as discussed in earlier segments, become notably more variable during REM compared to the steadier patterns of non-REM sleep, and similar irregularity has been observed in other autonomic measures as well, reflecting the more turbulent, unpredictable pattern of brain activity characteristic of this stage. Researchers have described REM sleep as a period during which the usual, tightly regulated coordination between different autonomic functions appears to loosen somewhat, with individual systems behaving in ways that are harder to predict from one moment to the next compared to the calmer, more uniform regulation typical of slow-wave sleep. This is HT to reflect the underlying brainstem activity driving REM sleep itself, activity that appears to influence multiple autonomic pathways simultaneously, sometimes in ways that do not perfectly align with one another. Picture a large ship's crew who have, for this one stretch of the voyage, been given considerably more individual latitude to respond to conditions as they personally see fit, resulting in a period where the vessel's overall course remains steady, even as the coordination among its individual systems grows visibly looser. It is a fitting closing detail for this stage of the journey that REM sleep, so often defined by its vivid inner world, carries this same quality of controlled unpredictability into the body's own physiological rhythms as well. Sleep unfolds in repeating cycles, each one roughly 90 minutes long. A full night of sleep is not a single, uniform experience but a series of repeating cycles, each typically lasting somewhere between 70 and 120 minutes, with 90 minutes often cited as a representative average. Each cycle generally moves through the lighter stages of non-REM sleep into deeper slow-wave sleep, before concluding with a period of REM sleep, after which the cycle begins again. A typical night includes somewhere between 4 and 6 of these complete cycles, depending on total sleep duration. Importantly, these cycles are not identical copies of one another repeated through the night. Their internal composition shifts considerably from the beginning of the night to the end, a pattern explored further in the segment that follows, meaning the experience and physiological content of sleep in the first cycle can look quite different from that of the last, even though both are technically composed of the same basic stages. Picture ocean waves arriving steadily along a shoreline, each one recognizably similar in basic shape and rhythm to the one before it, and yet no two waves ever arriving with exactly the same size, force, or duration. It is a helpful corrective to imagine sleep this way, not as a single uninterrupted descent into unconsciousness, but as a patterned, repeating journey, each cycle carrying its own particular emphasis within the larger architecture of an entire night. This 90-minute pattern belongs to a broader family of bodily rhythms. The roughly 90-minute cycling of sleep stages is one specific example of what researchers call an ultradian rhythm, a biological cycle that repeats more frequently than once every 24 hours, distinct from the longer circadian rhythms discussed earlier in this journey. Ultradian rhythms of similar length have been observed in other physiological processes as well, including subtle fluctuations in hormone release, alertness, and even certain patterns of attention during wakefulness, leading some researchers to propose that this roughly 90-minute cycle may reflect a more fundamental rhythm running throughout the nervous system generally, not simply confined to sleep. This broader pattern, sometimes referred to informally as the basic rest-activity cycle, suggests that the alternation between different types of neural activity may be a persistent feature of brain function around the clock, simply more visible and more clearly measurable during sleep, when the absence of voluntary movement and conscious thought allows the underlying rhythm to be observed with far greater clarity than is possible during an active, waking day. Picture a heartbeat, so easily noticed and measured, existing alongside countless other quieter rhythms in the body, rhythms that become far easier to detect only once the loud, distracting noise of ordinary waking activity has finally been set aside for the night. It is a fascinating thought to end this particular thread on, that the 90-minute architecture shaping an entire night's sleep may, in fact, be only the most visible expression of a rhythm quietly present in the nervous system at every hour of every day. The balance between deep sleep and REM shifts dramatically as the night goes on. While early sleep cycles are dominated by substantial amounts of slow-wave sleep, this balance shifts considerably as the night progresses. Later cycles contain progressively less deep sleep and correspondingly longer periods of REM sleep, with the final cycle or two of a typical night often containing very little slow-wave sleep at all, but a REM period that may last 30 minutes or more, considerably longer than the brief REM stretch that opened the night. This shifting pattern is thought to reflect the changing priorities of sleep across a single night, with the body prioritizing the deeply restorative, tissue-repairing functions of slow-wave sleep earlier on, when sleep pressure is highest, before shifting emphasis toward the memory consolidation and emotional processing functions more closely associated with REM sleep as the night continues. This is part of why sleep, cut short at the end of the night, even if total hours seem adequate, can disproportionately reduce REM sleep specifically, since this stage is concentrated so heavily in the final hours before natural waking. Picture a long journey that begins with the most demanding, effortful terrain tackled first, while energy is highest, gradually shifting toward a gentler, more reflective stretch of road as the destination draws nearer. It is a thoughtfully structured arrangement, a night that quietly reorganizes its own priorities as it unfolds, attending first to the body's most urgent physical repairs before turning its attention toward the mind's own quieter, more intricate work. Waking does not always mean full alertness has already arrived. Even once a person has physically woken, The transition into full mental clarity often lags behind, a phenomenon known as sleep inertia. This grogginess, which can include impaired reaction time, reduced short-term memory performance, and a general sense of mental fog, tends to be most pronounced when waking occurs from deep, slow-wave sleep rather than from the lighter stages more common in the final portion of a natural sleep cycle. Part of why abrupt alarms timed poorly against a person's sleep architecture can leave them feeling far groggier than the same amount of total sleep would otherwise suggest. Research on sleep inertia has found that its effects, while usually resolving within 15 to 30 minutes for most people, can occasionally persist considerably longer, particularly following significant prior sleep deprivation, and can measurably impair performance on cognitive and physical tasks during that window. A finding with meaningful practical implications for professions requiring rapid, high-stakes decision-making immediately after waking. Picture an engine that has just been started after sitting cold overnight, technically running, technically capable of movement, and yet clearly not yet operating at the smooth, responsive capacity it will reach only after a few minutes of proper warming. It is a fitting final observation that even the very last step of this entire nightly journey, the return to full waking awareness, is not an instantaneous event, but one more gradual transition, following faithfully in the same unhurried spirit as everything that came before it. The final hours of sleep prepare the body for its return to waking. As morning approaches, several systems begin a coordinated shift back toward wakefulness, even while sleep itself continues. Core body temperature, having reached its lowest point in the pre-dawn hours, begins climbing again. Cortisol, as discussed in an earlier segment, starts its characteristic rise roughly 30 to 45 minutes before natural waking. REM periods, already lengthened compared to earlier in the night, reach their longest and most vivid stretch in this final phase, often producing the dream a person is most likely to actually remember upon waking, simply because it occurred closest to the moment of conscious awareness returning. This final stretch illustrates that waking is not a single, sudden event, but the last visible stage of a gradual, carefully sequenced process that has been building for hours beforehand, involving hormonal shifts, temperature changes, and changing patterns of brain activity, all converging toward the same eventual outcome. Picture a theater's house lights slowly rising after a long performance, not switched on abruptly, but brought up gradually over several minutes, giving the audience time to reorient before being asked to fully return to the world outside. It is fitting, in a way, that a process as elaborate and carefully layered as falling asleep should be mirrored by an equally gradual, equally deliberate process, guiding the body back out of it once morning finally arrives. Waking, like sleep itself, is something the body prepares for in advance. The transition out of sleep, depends on a delicate interplay between the same two systems introduced earlier in this journey: the circadian clock and the homeostatic sleep pressure that has, by this point in the night, been substantially cleared. As adenosine levels fall and circadian signals shift toward promoting wakefulness, the brain gradually transitions out of the deep, synchronized rhythms of slow-wave sleep and toward the lighter, more easily interrupted stages that typically precede natural waking, often emerging from a final REM period rather than directly from deep sleep. Light plays a critical closing role in this process as well, reaching those same specialized retinal cells discussed at the very beginning of this journey, reinforcing the circadian signal, already nudging the body toward wakefulness, and helping to suppress the last remaining traces of the night's melatonin release. Picture a long, winding staircase finally reaching its final few steps, the climb no less real for how gentle and familiar these last steps feel calm, paired to the steeper climb below, simply because so much of the ascent has already, quietly, been completed. There is something fitting in ending this exploration here, recognizing that waking is not separate from sleep, but its natural, carefully prepared conclusion, one final quiet transition among the many the body has performed, faithfully, and without ever asking for notice, throughout the entire night. And so, we come to the end of our journey, through everything your body quietly does each night without your knowing. We began with a clock made of only 20,000 cells, keeping faithful, invisible time in the center of your brain. We followed a small gland as it released its quiet signal of darkness, watched your hands and feet grow warm as your core cooled itself for rest, and traced the slow, patient buildup of a single molecule, counting every hour you spent awake. We saw two ancient systems, one measuring pressure and one measuring time, finally aligned to open the door into sleep itself. We felt the heart ease into a gentler rhythm, and breath settle into its slow, involuntary cadence. We wandered through sleep spindles standing quiet watch over your rest, and stood inside the rare, unified chorus of deep, slow-wave sleep. We discovered a hidden plumbing system, quietly widening its channels each night simply to carry the day's debris away. We watched growth hormone arrive in its single great nightly wave, rebuilding muscle and repairing tissue worn thin by an ordinary day. We saw your immune system quietly muster its own defenses in the dark, and finally we crossed into REM, where the body deliberately, carefully locks itself still, so that the mind can dream without ever placing itself at risk. We even followed the 90-minute tides of a full night's cycling, and watched the whole system gently reverse itself in the final hours, easing you, step by unhurried step, back toward morning. None of this required your permission or your attention. It happened, and it will happen again tonight, exactly as it has every night of your life, in a rhythm older than memory itself. You are a part of this story, not merely a witness to it, a living continuation of a rhythm that has been quietly unfolding in creatures like you for longer than any single mind can properly hold. So let your eyes rest now, heavy behind their lids. Let your breath find its own slow, unhurried pace, the way it always eventually does. There is nothing left to figure out tonight, nothing left to solve. Every system you needed already knows exactly what to do, and it will carry you gently the rest of the way, whether you notice or not. If you enjoyed this quiet journey, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. And if you are still awake, there may be another journey waiting for you now, just on the screen in front of you, ready whenever you are. Sleep well and good night.